please, if you are triggered by certain subject matter about abuse, please don't watch this next video, because it could be quite tough. When I was a child, I was SAed on more than one occasion by a medical professional. And I was too young to really understand that what occurred was wrong. And like I say, it was a number of times. And it's left me with some triggers that I'm trying to work through with a mental health professional. And that story will become relevant in the next story I'm about to tell. So, Professor Hebbard, I was referred to Professor Hebbard by my GP, and Professor Hebbard's colleague took the appointment instead of Professor Hebbard. And I was told that the appointment would be with Professor Hebbard. When I entered the room for the consultation, I discovered that it wasn't Professor Hebbard, because I knew what Professor Hebbard looked like. I knew his voice, and this guy clearly wasn't Professor Hebbard. And the first thing he did wrong is he advocated for an operation that would end my life, because I have fibrosing ossification progressiva, and he claimed to have read my medical notes, so he knew that, and I was upset with him over that. But I didn't do anything about it. I just asked him if he read my records and if he still wanted to recommend the operation that would take my life, which he did, so I wasn't impressed with that. But also, the way he interacts with staff, so nurses and other colleagues, and the way he interacts with me as the patient was very triggering for me, because it was exactly as the doctor who SA'd me as a child on more than one occasion. I know they're different people, but he was acting the same towards me and the staff, and it triggered me, and I said, this is not going to work, you can't be my doctor, and I left the room. I couldn't deal with him at all. And then I told Professor Hebbard, and I told the Royal Melbourne, it's too triggering for me. He's too triggering for me in the way that he interacts with me, and I won't say exactly what he did and continued to do during the consultation, and I won't say what he did to the staff, but it was enough that it was triggering for me, because it was exactly the way that medical professional acted who SA'd me as a child. And in my mind, because of the triggers and the way he treated me, I just thought, if I have to put up with this man, I'm going to unalive myself. And I thought, so my choices are either reject him as my doctor and ask for someone else, or unalive myself, but I can never ever be around him again. And I made that perfectly clear to Professor Hebbard, and I explained that I had been SA'd as a child, and I explained it in more detail than what I'm explaining it here on YouTube, and it was pretty graphic. He just looked at me, and I thought he understood my position, that it had been too traumatic to be in the room with the gastroenterologist from the United Kingdom, that the way he carried on in the consultation was too triggering for me, and that I couldn't deal with this man on any level, because frankly, because of the triggers and the post-traumatic stress, I wanted to unalive myself so that I didn't have to ever see him again. And I discussed this with Professor Hebbard, and I said, I need another doctor to take it on. Either you or somebody else, but I cannot be in the same room with him again. He needs to stay away from me, please. I know he works at the Royal Melbourne, but he needs to stay away from me, because I can't handle it. And I thought, in light of what I went through and the fact of explaining it, then I thought, they'll understand. But I had a few visits with Professor Hebbard. Then they brought back in the gastroenterologist from the UK that caused all the triggers and made me feel like I wanted to unalive myself because of the earlier abuse. So, they brought him back, and I just looked at him and I said, no, please leave. No, please leave. I want somebody else. And I asked him to leave the cubicle immediately, and I said I need somebody else. I thought that Professor Hebbard had enough humanity, decency, not to put me in the position of being triggered by that doctor and wanting to unalive myself. I thought the Royal Melbourne supported survivors, and I thought Professor Hebbard would have supported survivors. I thought he would have had some kind of training, like sensitivity training, or some kind of training to understand that this was not going to work, and I can't make it work. And it's telling me I have to deal through him, through this doctor from the UK that's triggering me, telling me I have to have him. That doesn't work, that can't work. I thought there'd be some understanding at the hospital and some leeway to have a different doctor, particularly as there are a number of gastroenterologists. He's not the only one. And this incident happened some time ago, and it caused me to feel a lack of respect for Professor Hebbard. If he couldn't respect me as a survivor and protect me as a survivor who is going through a process with a mental health professional to heal over what happened all those years ago as a child, if he couldn't support me and protect me from someone who was triggering me and making me feel like I wanted to unalive myself, instead he said, no, you have to have that man, and if you don't, you can't have a feeding tube, putting me in the position where I had to choose between unaliving myself because I couldn't cope with the triggers that this doctor was always doing to me, or accept that I would die as a result of not having a tube. These are some of the ultimatums that Professor Hebbard has given me and the Royal Melbourne Hospital has given me at large. I would have thought, as a sexual assault survivor, I would have found some support from the Royal Melbourne Hospital and Professor Hebbard over this issue. But I found there was none. There was no, okay, let's work around this. Let's remove him from your cubicle. Let's reset the situation, find a new gastroenterologist. We'll have someone else come down and deal with you. They didn't do that. So this was very, very upsetting for me. Yeah.